You are listening to the second part of the story. You can listen to the first part in the previous video or by following the link in the description under this video. Happy listening. So the law school career office said I should ask for $25 an hour, Rebecca Flynn said. She was the final applicant for the summer intern position I posted at the law school, and she was the only one worth considering. Rebecca was local but went to Cornell. Without wasting any time, she told me that she had been included in the legal review and had received a summer job offer at a well-known Manhattan firm. Her plans for a summer internship in a big city were disrupted by circumstances. Her father had a heart attack, and Rebecca chose her father over her career. I like that, and also that she comes from a middle-class family. She needed summer income to finance her final year of law school. 3 months have passed since my appointment as special prosecutor. Tara did the work of searching and identifying targets. I, on the contrary, was mainly engaged in analyzing the remaining cases. I needed to free myself for what lay ahead. Now, I was ready for the next steps. $25 an hour was what colleges were asking for summer interns. I wasn't sure of the motivation for this. No one except large firms could pay such wages, and few firms of any size hired employees. The average single person, like myself, will work 60 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, to earn $60,000. Do the math yourself. 60,000 divided by 3,000 hours, and you get $20 an hour. The second-year interns wanted to earn more than the owners. I offer $17.50 an hour, I said. Oh, she said disappointedly, but I'll offer you a deal. $25 for each billable hour and $15 for all non-billable hours. She looked at me cheerfully, as if I was trying to deceive her. In her opinion, all hours are billable. Oh, the naivety of youth. However, in this case, my trick was planned to enrich both of us. I intended to bill the state for her services at $125 an hour, receiving $100 each time she billed a billable hour. That was the beauty of having the governor as my client. The downside to this situation was that the governor was the client, or more specifically, Miss Wilson. I had already been working as a special prosecutor for 3 months, and she had been on my tail since the end of the first week. The governor would like to receive a progress report, Miss Wilson wrote to me. I just started working, and she already wants results. Sorry, independent prosecutor. I'll make a report at the end, I answered. The next day she called. The governor would like to receive monthly bills, she said. The usual is in 60 to 90 days, I answered. Not if the appointing authority decides that monthly bills are necessary, Carrie Wilson said, in her most authoritative voice. I suspected that one of the older, more experienced employees had told her how to monitor what I was doing. To get paid, my accounts had to show normal and necessary activities and, moreover, be detailed enough to reveal what I did. Moreover, if she wanted, she could question each entry and demand an explanation as to why it was needed. In other words, she could track my every move through billing. Do you require monthly billing? I asked. Yes, I demand it. That is, the governor demands. I liked her. She was smart enough to be wary of me, and, like me, she felt that something was wrong. By this time, I had read all the documents in the Corrections Commission's voluminous file, and I was sure that Miss Wilson had too. This didn't add up to a good case against anyone. Politically, it's a disgrace for the governor, but nothing more. I made some casual inquiries about Carrie Wilson. She studied at Yale and Wellesley. I recently graduated from the Faculty of Law, but was not allowed to practice. The governor, no doubt, kept her too busy to take the bar exam. She turned down a clerkship in the 2nd District to work for the governor and was one of many who hoped to follow him to the White House. She was the daughter of the Wilsons of Westchester. Dad was a Wall Street representative, and Mom belonged to the DeVoe Society. They were the old New York elite. Carrie was rich and well-connected. Not my type at all, and she didn't trust me at first sight. However, I couldn't blame her for the latter. Okay, I accept, Rebecca said, interrupting my thoughts. Fine. You start on Wednesday, I said. We were in my 3rd month as special prosecutor, and I had nothing to show for it yet, as Ms. Wilson had repeatedly said. However, we had a lead. Tara's friend, a feminist lawyer, showed us a way through the silent wall of prison guards. There was an officer in Van Patten prison, Robert LeBoc. He was a completely ordinary person, except for one small fact. Bob was going through a divorce from his 2nd wife. The couple had 2 children, but none together. Bob was a bit of a squirrel. He saved every spare coin, and the current Mrs. LeBoc wanted her share. The only obstacle to divorce was money, and the fight became bitter. Bob could account for all assets except the $5,000 cash he withdrew. It was an operazione culminate, or more likely, didn't want to explain. We received a wiretap warrant, which was supposed to appear at the end of the month. But for now it was a secret known only to the judge, Tara, and me. My new secretary will have to rummage through the prison archives while I focus on what really interests us. Hopefully the suspects and Miss Wilson will be fooled by each other. My personal life has progressed no further than my investigation. Simone and I went to consultations with Anna Svensson twice a week. The first few sessions were aimed at proving that Simone had committed a crime and was deeply repentant. Anna was quite strict with my wife, but this was done in order to show how impartial she was. Consultations quickly turned into an intricate dance. Simone asked for forgiveness, I had to forgive her, and then we would have to go through the process of rebuilding our relationship. Unfortunately, I'm stuck on the forgiveness part. Anna finally brought up the issue. It's not just about infidelity, Jim, is it? She asked. No, I think the problem is broader, I answered. Then tell me what's wrong, Simone demanded. You abandoned us, the girls and me, and you will do it again, I said. How can you say that? Asked Simone. Let's try to figure it out. Feelings are what they are, Anna warned Simone. This was more than 2 months ago, and we still couldn't figure it out with each other. I became increasingly convinced that counseling would not help. Sex also disappeared. We grew more and more distant from each other. I was hurt, and she was angry, and more every day. Simone believed that I should accept her apology and that we should move on with our lives. I didn't see how an apology could help. Dances to benefit pediatricians took place on the last Saturday of June. The dance was chaired by Simone Redmond, the new director of pediatric services at Memorial Hospital. My wife took back her maiden name. I found out about this after seeing the invitations. The co-chair was Dr. Esha Faraji. For this occasion, I wore a rented tuxedo. There was no mistaking the origin of my formal attire, nor could I ignore the comparison with my wife, who looked like $1 million in her skimpy black dress. She was the star of the evening. Aside from the handsome Dr. Faraji, who monopolized my wife as his dance partner. The only one who seemed least upset by Faraji's attentions to my wife was her friend Claire, who was accompanied to the event by her husband. But Deck seemed only a temporary guest. Claire was dressed to the nines, too sexy for a mother of 3. However, who am I to object? My wife was dressed like a single woman on the hunt. Their hip, high-end styles made Faraji and Caruso look like seedy wannabes. Deck and I couldn't compete, and it was obvious that no one, including our wives, was paying the slightest attention to us. There was an exception. Anna Svensson found me. How are you, Jimmy? Anna asked. It couldn't be better, I replied. My dad always said that it's better to hold salt in an open hand, she said. I'll remember this the next time I hold salt. She loves you and he has no chance, Anna said. It's true, but it's fundamentally wrong, and we both know it. My first visit to Van Patten Penitentiary was long overdue, but I knew that I would not find the answer to my question there. However, in the first week of July, I went to the prison and made the required call to the warden. The prison was little more than a collection of residential buildings surrounded by a 3-meter 6-centimeter high fence topped with razor wire and a winding steel band, decorated every few centimeters with a bow of metal blades. An internal fence divided the facility into 4 sectors. I headed to the administrative office, but first I had to go through the main gate. It was nothing more than a square concrete box, 6 meters on a side, divided in half by metal detectors. There were 3 guards at the gate, 2 men and 1 woman. At first they were cold, but they became even colder when I identified myself. I was taken through a metal detector, detained, and searched. 20 minutes later, I was walking along the path to the administration building. The superintendent's office was a short walk from the building's entrance. Her secretary was waiting for me at the door and showed me the way. The superintendent's office was spacious but tastefully furnished. The furniture was Corecraft brand, ugly prison furniture that was legally only sold to the government. Superintendent Camilla Blake was a woman of average height and about 50 years of age. She had graying dark hair and was dressed in a blue-gray formal suit that would not have been out of place for a school principal. She had an attractive but stern face with severe features. She stood up from the table to greet me and led me to a small conference table. The furnishings of the room were complemented by her table and a small sofa with chairs. The conference table was small, but large enough to seat 8 or so people. As we sat down at the table, I noticed that her face was familiar to me, although I could not remember having ever met her. "I was glad to hear that you were appointed," she began. "We happen to know each other. My grandchildren go to school with your daughters." Prompted by this, I remembered where I had seen her before. Her daughter was a tall, fair-haired woman, and her son and daughter, it seemed to me, were older than my 2. "I thought I knew you," I said. "Yes, your daughters are beautiful, like your wife. She, of course, evokes my admiration and the admiration of my employees, especially the medical staff. We use Memorial Hospital, where your wife works, for external medical care for our inmates. Your wife is a wonderful woman. You must be very proud of her." "Yes, I'm proud, just like our daughters." "We are a happy family," I answered. "As I already said, I welcome your appointment to this position. We are one family here, and, like your wife, we serve a humanitarian purpose. Our occupation is not highly valued, but it is beneficial. You, as I understand it, are a good person whose character comes from within. You don't wear it like a mantle to judge others," she said. "Well, you regard my merits as more than I deserve. There is no need to attribute to me the good deeds of my wife. I have a job here, and I will perform my function to the best of my ability, which may cause some pain," I said. "I judge you by the care that I saw you show towards your daughters. All I ask is that my people be treated impartially and understandingly," she said. "I fully intend to be fair and impartial to both your staff and the inmates of this facility. I think highly of Van Patten Penitentiary, as does my wife. She often talks about how dedicated your medical staff is. I think people are often surprised by the medical care provided to prisoners. I know this is not always an easy task. Women prisoners, in particular, often need more routine services that only outside medical staff can provide," I said. "Yes, an insightful observation. Our internal women's health services are adequate, but gynecological and surgical services are provided externally," admitted the superintendent. "Memorial is not the largest hospital in the area, but it provides adequate care for our women." I missed the word adequate, and didn't realize that Regional Medical Center had much more capacity than Memorial. "Well, let's move on to the reason for my visit. To assist in the investigation, I hired a legal secretary, a young law student. I will send her here for preliminary investigation. She would need a place to work and would review certain records, mainly records of staff assignments and hours, and records of inmate housing. I know you may be strict about protocol and make it difficult to gather the information we need, but I hope we can work in tandem to get things done quickly. You will have my full cooperation in releasing anything that is not protected by the law, and as for closed documents, we will identify them so that you can get a subpoena," she said, and I could see that she was relieved that I was taking action, in such a casual and humble manner. I did not feel the slightest guilt that she misjudged my character or was unaware of the actual method of my investigation. While I seemed to be shuffling papers, Tara was eavesdropping on the conversations of her employees. Like any other successful prosecutor, I intended, to the extent possible, to invade the privacy of her employees and induce them to turn against each other. I was selling my soul for the governor's gold, and by the time the superintendent and Miss Wilson realized this, I planned to have the goods on someone. It was Simone's turn to pick up the girls, but she texted me that she was taking them to their mother so we could spend the night alone. Something happened to my wife. When I returned home, there was no green lace, only an unhappy woman. "We need to talk," Simone began. "I thought that was what we were doing in our consultations with Anna," I said. "We've been married for 10 years, and we've been together even longer. I know you, Jimmy. You are not an open person. You have a cunning mind that loves to hide and deceive. It has never been easy for me to be your lover, knowing that I cannot fully penetrate this curtain that you hide behind. But I always knew your heart was true, and you were a wonderful husband and father," Simone said. "I didn't know you felt that way about me," I said. "You're not listening. I love you. You are a good man and husband. He took care of me and did everything for me. But you never allowed me to fully enter you. Anna is only now coming to the realization that you were not honest during our sessions. I know that's not true. Cheating comes naturally to you, but if we want to have any chance of healing the wound in our relationship, you have to be honest with me for once." "What do you want me to say? Tell me what I can do to make you forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you at all. Please, let's put this behind us." "You can start by telling me about Ash Faraji," I said. "Damn. What does he have to do with us? He's hunting you, and you're keeping him in suspense." "A kiss here and there. What is this for?" "Okay. He's an attractive man and just my type. A woman needs a man. At least I do. My husband keeps me at a distance. So yes, I may have been holding it in reserve. I would let him steal a kiss or feel him, but I would never do anything else. He has no chance if my husband comes back to me," Simone said as tears began to wet her cheeks. I knew her as well as she knew me. After a moment, her nose started running, and she turned away to cry out her grief. It was only partly real. Simone was caught between grief and anger. She wanted all this behind her so she could return to her family without consequences for her actions. I wasn't afraid of Dr. Faraji. Yes, he was sexually attractive to my wife, but she was not the type of woman to be sexually attracted. I've seen her flirt with men before when she wanted something. The question was, what did Simone want from Faraji? With Simone, it took more than just agility and sexuality. She was looking for a man who could give her more. She wanted and needed a strong emotional connection. This is what failed her in Africa. This need to be with a man, to be in his arms and under his protection. She was such a strong woman, but still a woman. I've lived long enough to know that women crave male companionship, and sex is the smallest part of that craving. So what did her kiss with the doctor mean? "Will you promise never to do this again if we can restore our relationship?" I said. "Of course," she answered without hesitation. "That means no more Doctors Without Borders or other humanitarian escapades," I said. "What?" "You heard me. No more adventures away from your family. You are my wife, not the savior of the world." I saw the conflict within her, and I think that, perhaps for the first time, she was faced with a real choice. In the end, she must choose between her family and her calling. It was a choice between me and many, to be with one man or to serve humanity. Simone could return home, but this was not always and not forever. She intended to leave again, whether she voiced the fact or not. Simone didn't answer. She sat for a moment thinking, and then slowly stood up and headed towards the stairs. I gave her some time and then followed her. When I reached our bedroom, I found the door locked. I wasn't sure if this was the answer to my ultimatum or if she was still thinking about it. That night, I slept soundly on the living room couch. I made a decision. Tara was in my office early this morning. Her Cheshire cat grin indicated that the hunt was a success. She brought me one of those big striped bags that you can hide a directional microphone in. One of my people and I played a couple in love at the Whitetail Hotel. We had a booth in the back that gave us an unobstructed view of the bar room while we pretended to kiss. Bobby LeBach laid it all out. she announced with more glee than I'd seen from her since she left the police force. She placed the recorder on my desk and started recording. She set it to record the conversation. The bar was noisy, and Labak began speaking in what he must have thought was a whisper, but sounded clear on the tape. Labak, you have no choice. DNA will give you away even if she has a miscarriage, but what if she gives birth? Well, it wouldn't be that hard to figure out which African-American officer was doing it with a pretty white prisoner. Second voice. But the risk! I don't want to go deeper than I already have. In the end, she begged for it, and I paid for the pills. You all said it was safe. Labak, it was safe, but accidents happen. And this is the final fix. You pay $5,000 for a doctor, and she goes on sick leave, complaining of post-menstrual cramps and continued bleeding. Doc will take care of the rest. Second voice. But what if everything goes wrong? Labak, nothing will go wrong. And if it does, then for God's sake she will be in the hospital. It goes on like this, with the black guy whining for a while, but you get it, Tara said, turning off the recorder. Do we know who this black officer is? I asked my man to follow him home. This is Charles Washington, coming from New York. Currently lives alone in Latham. I'll have more information after we check him, she replied. Okay, document the recording and prepare an affidavit for a warrant to wiretap Officer Washington, I said. God, you're cool. That's a whole new can of worms, right? No. It's actually a hook that's been there since Stan Katsaros offered the bait that we took. I don't understand, Tara said. You'll understand. You'll barely know who Mrs. Katsaros sees as a gynecologist, I said, sending Tara off to do her duties. It wasn't exactly a guess. I knew Tara would look, but I didn't need it. Sometimes 1 + 1 is more than 2. For my part, I called my new secretary's cell phone and told her to check Officer Charles Washington's work assignments and bring me the name, age, and photograph of every white woman stationed in any unit where he worked. Start from today and work backwards. The sooner the better, I told the rather puzzled young law student. Then he issued a warrant to spy on Officer Washington, after which he called his good friend Deck Hudson and invited him to lunch. The Path 9. Diner is located south of town on the west bank of the river. It's not that far from Route 32 and the interchange. There are a lot of diesel vehicles passing by, and this is a good place for a driver to have lunch near his workshop. The diner is nothing like a traditional one. This is a large barn built from prefabricated sections. I was already sitting in the booth drinking coffee when Dake arrived. Glad you called, Jim. I just wanted to get together, Dake said, sitting down opposite me. When Dake sat down, the waitress was already there to take his drink order and tell him about the specials. She gave him a friendly, familiar smile. This was his home turf, and he felt comfortable, very relaxed, just like I wanted. It's been too long, I said, and I didn't want to be so upset with you the last time we spoke. It's a matter of situation. I know you and Claire were just trying to help. I take no offense. These are emotions. It takes a little getting used to, he said. How's Claire? Still working a lot? I asked. He gave me a slightly suspicious look, but quickly cast it aside and treated my words as something kind. Well, that's good money. Don't get me wrong, the shop does a good job, but we depend on it for all the benefits and a steady paycheck. The cost of running a small business these days is incredible, but you should know that, he said. Yes, you are right. With all those payroll taxes and insurance premiums and disability insurance and health insurance, there's not much left over, I said. Oh, don't forget about liability insurance, self-employment taxes, and sales taxes, he added. So that's why you let Claire have an affair with Esha Faraji? Because I never considered you a cuck, I said, dumping my suspicions on him. If I had any doubts, they were quickly dispelled. Dake froze, looking like I had hit him. And, perhaps, in some sense, it was so. But he came to his senses and tried to deny everything. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Come on, you understand everything. Claire, as my wife has always said, is the best surgical nurse in this part of the state. It was to be expected that Dr. Faraji, the head of surgery, would want her in his operating room while Simone was away. Faraji is a sexual maniac, and he's certainly not the kind of man who would turn down an attractive nurse. But you might be wondering who told me that Claire fell for his charms. Oddly enough, it was Claire herself, with the assistance of my wife. It's not what they said, but how they did it. First, when I asked Claire about Dr. Faraji, she was hesitant. Not much, I admit, but enough. Then Faraji drove my wife home very late and stole a kiss from her as she got out of his Porsche. I asked her why she was with Faraji, and imagine my surprise when she said that Claire had arranged the trip and drove home in the doctor's Porsche. It might have been an innocent trip with another man, but not with Faraji. And certainly not if you live 20 miles in the wrong direction. Dake looked a little puzzled, so I enlightened him. From the traffic police records, I found out who owns the Porsche and where the owner lives. Faraji did not drop your wife off at your house. He dropped her off at his condominium on the way to my place. He lives just a few miles from me. She spent the night with him while you were home with the kids. Dake hesitated for a minute and then said, "You have to understand. There's no way a guy like me can compete with a rich doctor. This guy has it all. Looks, money, and, I'm told, a big thing between his legs. All I have is bills and 3 boys to take care of. So, I looked the other way, and, well, Claire, she makes it worth it. They treat me well, and Ash, he won't be in the picture forever. I let her have her affair. So what? And you should know that he will come for your wife next. The question you have to ask yourself is, will fighting him get you anywhere? No man has yet been successful in a divorce if there are children. I can lose everything just like you," he finished. "You might be right, but then again, this game could have a funny twist," I said, just as the waitress brought our food. I asked her to pack a box for me and left Dake to eat in peace. I didn't expect Lisa to come into my office that day when I pressed Dake, but she did. "I have information about a fertility clinic," she began. "Oh, okay," I replied. "There are no obligations at the moment. They just want to test your seminal fluid as a potential donor." "No problem, but I'm busy, so the sooner the better." "Ready to become a mother?" I asked, smiling. "I think yes. I know how much I want to try." "But how will Simone cope with this?" "She'll be fine," I assured. "I hope things are getting better between you two. I know you love each other very much, and your girls need both of you so much," Lisa said. "You sound like you have some big problem," I said. Before answering, Lisa looked at her hands. "I got to know you better, Jim. You look just a little like your sister. Not as open and forgiving. It doesn't take a lawyer to figure out that there is a problem in your marriage, and the reason may only be a surprise to someone who is truly innocent of the way this world we live in works." When she finished, she raised her eyes and looked at me. "I've known for a long time that my sister is lucky. Lisa is not only beautiful in body and soul, but also amazingly smart in a completely feminine sense. She knew exactly what the problem was between me and Simone, and no one needed to tell her about it. Don't worry, everything will work out," I said. "I pray about this for Vicky and Beth's sake. I love them as much as I hope to love my own children, and I wouldn't want them to get hurt." I took the card she gave me for the clinic and placed it in the corner of my desk. "I'll call you as soon as possible," I said. "Thank you, and think about it, please. Think about what's best for your daughters before you do anything," she said. I didn't miss the double meaning and realized that she had come, in part, to beg me to forget about the problems with my wife for the sake of my daughters, whom she loved. Pollyanna Randell, a.k.a. Anna Rand, a.k.a. Anna Randy, a.k.a. Scarlet Randy, had brown hair and brown eyes. Her height was 1.57 meters. She had the sexuality of Marilyn Monroe and the innocent looks of a schoolgirl. She looked old enough to be in junior high school, although her prison file said she was 19. Rebecca, my lawyer, did a good job. She narrowed the number of possible candidates for the role of Officer Washington's mistress to just 3. I eliminated the remaining 2 candidates for purely male reasons. I was betting that it would be Innocent Polly, as they preferred to call her. The girl had 2 convictions for obscenity, both related to her profession as a dancer. Her current sentence was for possession of a controlled substance, but her probation report stated she had not used it. She was caught for possession, but for whom it is unclear. This was the man she feared more than prison. "Do you understand these rights?" I asked. We sat in one of the rooms in the prison for meetings with the lawyer. I had Rebecca with me as a witness and a tape recorder for recording. I finished reading the angelic, beautiful Pollyanna her rights, a necessary precaution against what she might say. "Do you think I need a lawyer?" asked Polly. "Choose for yourself. But since you are a victim, I wouldn't think so," I said. At the word victim, her eyes trembled slightly. "No prisoner can consent to sex with one of his guardians," I explained. "Sex?" she asked. "If we're honest, we can get along much better," I said. "I just asked what you were talking about. Officer Washington and your pregnancy," I said, sharpening my voice. I saw that I shook her slightly. "Do I need to request a compulsory urine test?" I asked. She thought about it and apparently decided to give it up. "What will happen to me for this?" she asked. "You have 2 years left until the end of your term. I think we can persuade the governor to commute the remaining sentence. I'll still get out in a year if I behave well. You need to do more. I was not only with Charlie Washington, and I can turn others over to you," said Pollyanna. "More?" I asked as my brain went into overdrive. "Turn off the recorder and send the girl out of here," she said, grinning slyly. I hesitated, not wanting to be alone with this witch. I had no illusions. Behind the innocent face was an evil soul. "What happened? Are you afraid of little me?" she teased. I turned to Rebecca. "Do you have a watch?" "No, I use the phone. It's taken away when I get to prison," Rebecca answered. "Here, take mine," I said, handing her my wristwatch. The watch was good, although not very expensive. A gift from my wife when she was a fourth-year medical student. Simone worked extra shifts at the hospital to buy me this gift. I treasured this ancient way of telling time. "Take your watch and go out for exactly 2 minutes," I told Rebecca. When the door closed behind my assistant, Pollyanna wasted no time in getting down to business. "A big lawyer like you probably knows someone who could help me find a good home for my child," she said, placing one hand on her stomach. I was not embarrassed by the sudden concern for a child for whom she was ready to abort. "What type of help are you looking for?" "Well, you know, assistance in private adoption with a suitable couple." "A rich, suitable couple?" "Preferably rich." "A mixed-race child might not be so desirable," I said. She laughed. "Charlie Washington thinks too highly of himself. I have some top candidates. It was just easier to blame him," she said. "Okay, you leave early, and I'll find a lawyer for a private adoption," I said. "Okay, I'll tell you everything when I see the lawyer," she said. The deal was done. I asked the superintendent to place Pollyanna Randall under protective custody until I could complete the deal. The next step was to win over Washington and then Labak. As it turned out, it only took 2 heartbeats when Officer Washington read the Pollyanna statement and realized that his fellow officers were making him a scapegoat. Labak fell as soon as Washington turned everything on him. Labak gave me the man I really needed, but I knew that the words of an easily accessible girl and a dirty commander would not be powerful enough to destroy the real target. I needed a respected witness. I could see the displeasure on Superintendent Blake's face. We were in her office. She was sitting at her desk and I was standing. "I think the agenda is clear," I said. "But do you need medical records?" She answered, "Yes, and the order was signed by Judge Clement of the state court after I provided him with permission from each patient." My secretary, Rebecca, spent 2 weeks collecting these permits from current and former prisoners. The names were provided by Labak. The promises that Rebecca made in exchange for releases were up to me and the governor to keep. Some had their sentences reduced, others were put on the list for pardon consideration. But I had releases and a judge's order. Superintendent Blake knew where this was going, and she had probably already heard rumors that officers Labak and Washington were informing on their comrades. Camilla Blake sighed, shook her head, and picked up her office phone. 40 minutes later, her staff was laying out folders on the conference table, and I was giving orders to copy them. I took the originals and left the copies, watching the process carefully, even though I knew what I would find. The superintendent and her staff went about their work in silence. I took Tara and 2 of her employees with me to help ensure the safety of the records. The last thing I wanted was for the arrest to be disrupted now. In total, we carried 6 bank boxes with documents into Tara's truck. Now everything depended on the next step. I saw that my sister was still skeptical. "Don't trust your brother?" I asked. She was driving the car, and I could look at her face while she looked at the road. "It looks like a lot depends on what the accomplice testifies," Tara said. "We know how it worked, and this will help. We know that the gynecologist sent women to the hospital for treatment. Each patient was seen by the same physician, and the same nurse was assigned and signed her name on each appointment. Yes, but without a nurse, you only have the words of the criminals that they were pregnant, and the doctor changed this condition. These records tell a completely different story. Do you think the jury won't believe the doctors?" "I'm counting on the nurse," I said. "Do you understand these rights?" I asked Claire Hudson. "Jimmy, why are you doing this to me?" Claire demanded. "I had the county sheriff's highway patrol arrest her on her way to work. He put his wife's best friend in a prison cell for several hours, and then left her in the interrogation room for another 2. I knew by this time she was scared, and hopefully ready to talk. You committed crimes," I said. "What?" "You can't believe it. You helped perform illegal abortions and falsified records." "Why would you say that?" "I have notes with your signature. Your name and Faraji's name are on all operational cards. So this is a common procedure, and abortion is legal in this state. But not when it is done without consent. No one was forced. The women were prisoners in prison and could not freely give consent. If you didn't know it was wrong, why did you hide it? I'm just a nurse. I'm following the instructions. The head nurse, without whose help the whole scheme collapses. You forgot that I know the rules of your hospital. They needed your help with medical procedures and your signature on the protocols confirming what was done. I know that what you said they did and what actually happened are not the same thing. You covered for Kuroso and Faraji, but mostly Faraji, who was your lover. You can't prove all this, she said, but without conviction. I showed her the testimony I collected from the officers and prisoners. That was all I needed. She broke down and started crying. Declan admitted to me that you were Faraji's lover. You really did this to him. No, you don't understand. We didn't actually harm anyone. Dec loves me. He understood everything. The women needed help. Ash was simply doing Tony Kuroso a favor. Read the testimony. They received money under the table to hide evidence of rape. Claire put her head down on the table and just cried her eyes out. Tara was waiting for me to play the role of the good cop. I handed Claire over to her, and she extracted a statement from her that Kuroso and Faraji roasted. Their scheme had to seem reliable and safe. Who would doubt that a doctor treats his patient? Women simply came to the hospital complaining about women's problems, and the authorities were forced to send them to a gynecologist who worked under a contract with the government. This doctor was Kuroso. If he said she needed surgery, no one could challenge his decision. Faraji performed the operation with the help of nurse Claire Hudson, who he seduced. Kuroso and Faraji were running a double business. One transaction they received money from the government, and the other in cash under the table. It seemed like a small scheme at first, but by the time Claire finished speaking, it had become much bigger. Abortions were not the only service provided. They treated sexually transmitted diseases, prescribed birth control, and covered up any and all evidence of illicit sex. I was naive enough to believe that this was all there was to it, but live and learn. I returned home late. There was a lot of work to be done in presenting the case to the grand jury. It looks so easy on TV, but in real life it requires preparation. The first problem is to assemble a jury if there is none. Smaller counties do not have a standing grand jury. Jury assignment can be a significant administrative process. But Stan Katsaros had the jury already drawn, as if he was only waiting for me. And of course he was. When I arrived, Simone and the girls were already having dinner. Simone made soup and bought fresh bread from the bakery. I took my seat and listened to my daughters discuss their day. From the wife's side, an eerie silence reigned at the table. I knew that by now she must have known that I had arrested Claire, but she did not mention it in front of our daughters. Simone put the girls to bed and, unusually, read them bedtime stories. I was in the small room downstairs that we use as an office. It's basically Simone's place, but I was sitting there trying to figure out my schedule for the next few weeks. They will be stressful for me. I thought about what Carrie Wilson would do when she saw my latest set of temp records. She wanted action. Now she will get it in full. "Why would you do something so cruel?" Simone asked from the doorway. "Just doing my job," I answered without even looking at her. "My job? Claire and Dake are our best friends, and she was just doing her job. She's a nurse, damn you. She covered for her lover, Eshe Faraji, and helped him in the crime, which makes her an accomplice. Are you crazy? She is our friend, a nurse who performed routine medical procedures. I cannot discuss this further. Is this some kind of revenge?" she demanded. "No, at least not from my side. I have been tasked with prosecuting those who sexually exploit prisoners in prisons, and that is exactly what I do. Arresting my friends. Yes, because they turned out to be criminals. You say that, and I hope for a grand jury." This effectively ended the discussion, and she left. We didn't talk for the next 2 weeks, but I hardly noticed it because I was busy. It was the evening before I was to begin presenting my case to the grand jury. I spent the whole day collecting evidence. Returning home late, I asked Lisa for time off, who was kind enough to come and take care of my daughters. "Thank you," I said to Lisa, making sure the girls were asleep. She was sitting in my living room watching the end of an old Hollywood tearjerker on TV. Tears were streaming down her face. Turning to me, she wiped them away with the back of her hand. "I don't usually feel this bad," she said. "It's because of the drugs. I have an insemination scheduled for the end of the week. I will use you as a donor for fertilization if you still agree with it. I would be honored and I will pray for your success," I said, kissing her wet cheek. "I hope this doesn't make your problems with Simone worse," she said, grabbing her coat and heading for the door. "No, my problems have nothing to do with you. I'm really sorry. You were the happiest couple I knew. I will pray that everything works out for you. It seems like two good people should be able to forgive each other," she said. I walked her out the door, thinking about what she had said last. The scandal engulfed both the hospital and Simone's associates. I was the instrument of this scandal. This will hurt my wife, but I didn't do anything that I should have apologized for. I was not Sister Teresa, ready to forgive the officials who raped me. I sought to punish the guilty. This was what the governor appointed me to do, and more importantly, this was what I was paid to do. However, deep down I knew that there was one aspect of this matter that had nothing to do with good and evil, guilt and innocence. Tomorrow I would, with luck, convince a jury to indict 2 doctors, a nurse, and half a dozen corrections officers. It may come later, but the start will make for a good scandal that will make the local news, and hopefully please the governor, various interest groups, and Carrie Wilson. My wife didn't get home until around midnight and looked tired. By then I was lying in bed reading a book because I was too excited to fall asleep. She took a shower and climbed into bed. She leaned towards me and turned off the light. I thought this was a signal that she wanted to sleep, but I was wrong. She slid down my torso and pulled my shorts down. We had sex until 2 o'clock in the morning, but she didn't say a word. She was a sexy tigress. There was no love in it, only sex. When she finished, she rolled over to her side of the bed and fell asleep. Thomas Everett Parker Jr. was a tall, distinguished man of about 50. He was a prominent lawyer in the area. Parker was known for his outstanding performance in court and his melodic baritone voice. He was the son of Thomas Everett Parker Sr., who was a local bar legend until his death. Younger and alive. Parker was Dr. Kuroso's lawyer. In just 2 days, I was able to get the grand jury to give me all the indictments I asked for. The first result of this was a call from Tom Parker asking for a meeting. A brilliant lawyer and his well-dressed client took seats in my modest conference room for the plea negotiations I assumed were about to take place. Parker began to outline my case and what he considered the doctor's impeccable character. In Parker's opinion, Kuroso was a saint in helping poor women with their reproductive rights. When Parker fell silent, Kuroso began his speech. The doctor gracefully, although rather rehearsed, asked for mercy. I saw the lawyer and client defeat my secretary, Rebecca, who was present at the meeting. "Excuse me," I said. "I have an indictment in 3 criminal cases and I see no reason to ignore them." I didn't say that Kuroso was a greedy ladies' man who didn't have the brains to stay away from the DA's wife, but that would be cruel, and it would lead them to believe that I know what set these strange events in motion. Kuroso looked at Parker, who raised his eyebrows and shrugged as if to say, "I told you so." Kuroso nodded to Parker, and the lawyer began to speak almost in a whisper. "My client has something to trade." "Trade?" "He might give you an indictment against someone more important," Parker said. My thoughts turned to the warden, but I was far from the truth. "I can hand over Commissar Abruzzo to you," said the doctor. I hoped I hid the surprise I felt, as well as the anticipation. I turned to Parker and asked, "It is legal? And how serious?" The lawyer presented the alleged information vaguely but convincingly. It appears that Kuroso paid for an assignment to monitor the health of inmates at Van Patten Penitentiary. The appointment cost $100,000 a year for what amounted to no more than 3 days a month. The kickback was $20,000 a year. Additionally, it was implied that Kuroso would ensure that no unwanted children were brought into the world who could not be accounted for. My business just rocketed into the stratosphere and everything finally made sense. The missing piece I knew was out there had finally arrived, and I was now enlightened. Parker saw right through me, and I wondered how much he understood. The deal we eventually struck allowed Kuroso to avoid prison, but he pleaded guilty to a felony. The doctor will lose his license, but will get it back by the time he completes 3 years of probation. He left my office happy. When they left, I was still stunned and slightly depressed at my own naivety. Rebecca had a different opinion. "Wow, I thought this summer would be boring," she said. "I learned more than I did in my entire time in college." "Well, don't be too happy. We just have more work to do. I made a new schedule. I called Tara and told her about the new development in our investigation, and then went home. I needed to rest in a quiet place and think about what had just happened. Simone's car in the driveway told me she was home in the middle of the day. There was no second car. Despite the way things were between us, I expected that I wouldn't catch anyone in the act, but I discovered that my wife was packing her things. "Were you going to tell me you were leaving?" I asked. She jumped slightly, not expecting to see me at this time of day, but went back to packing her suitcase. "Yes, of course," she said. "I was going to tell Vicky, Beth, and you tonight." "Can I ask why?" "There is a new outbreak of Ebola in Nigeria. I got a call at work. They need all the help they can get." "Okay, new question. Why you?" "Do not be like that. I have to go. If not me, then who?" "Maybe someone without a family who needs it." She laughed and turned to face me. "We both know that girls don't want me when they have you and you don't want me." "My daughters need a mother," I said. "No, they have a super dad. In the big world, he is a real asshole. But at home, he is everything the girls need. The problem is that he has a wife who no longer fits in his house. So it will be better for everyone. Maybe the next time I get home, we can put everything back together." "So that's all? You are leaving?" "Yes, but I need a favor. I want to take Claire with me. Can you negotiate for her to be released so she can do what God put her on this earth to do?" "I think this can be arranged. This may take several weeks." "Thank you. Angie's is one of many restaurant-bar combinations that line Western Avenue near the government and university campus. Mike Tillman, chairman of the Commission of Corrections, sat in a booth in the far corner. It was already well past lunchtime for most government employees, so the place was relatively empty. When I asked to meet, Mike invited me to lunch. He chose the time and place. The atmosphere was relaxed, where the civil servant was not out of his element. This maintained the illusion that the independent commission and the independent prosecutor were not actually colluding. At this point, if we met officially, people might get the wrong impression. Some might suspect that everything that happened was a setup, but no one would express their suspicions without solid evidence. "The chicken parmesan sandwich is good, but get the onion rings, not the fries," Mike said as I sat down at the table. As I took my seat, a bored waitress was called over, and I took Mike's recommendation and placed my order. "And coffee," I said, handing the menu to the waitress. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Mike began as soon as the girl left. "Well, I really only have one question," I said, trying to look him straight in the eyes. Mike just smiled at my attempt to control the conversation. "Only one?" "Yes, I understand perfectly well that I played the role of a pawn in this game." Nests cake, not pawns. At least a horse. Maybe not white at night, but still a horse. "A figure of speech for the party being manipulated," I said. "Now I'm curious. How do you see that you are being manipulated?" Mike said with a smile that let me know he already knew the answer. "Stan Katsaros is a man who is 20 years older than his wife. This is something that can make a man nervous, especially a not very attractive short Greek lawyer married to a very beautiful lady. But when he's the district attorney and he suspects his wife of infidelity, he has a lot of resources at his disposal," I said, watching Mike closely. He just nodded for me to continue. "So, when Stan found out that his wife was having an affair with a gynecologist, he was upset. But when he found out that the gynecologist deals with prisoners, he had a very big problem. He solved crimes within his jurisdiction, but did so through illegal surveillance. He got caught. If he acted on what he knew, he would be accused of abuse of power, not to mention exposed as a cuckold. On the other hand, what if it turns out that he knew and did nothing?" "Interesting problem," Mike said. "Yes, very much. But the solution is even more interesting. You see, Stan knows someone who can conduct an investigation that doesn't require much evidence or even explanation. An agency created just for this purpose. So naturally, Stan took his information to where it could be used." "Problem solved," Mike said. "But," I said. "But?" Mike asked. "Well, the man he saw had his own plans, a little revenge for being passed over. And this man knew something that Stan didn't." "For example?" "How the doctor got his job and how the system works," I said. "I haven't heard the question yet," he replied. "Why me? You could choose. Why choose an obscure lawyer with a less than stellar reputation to blow up the Department of Corrections?" Mike grinned widely and said, "Jimmy, you still don't understand." "As I said, a horse. The kind of guy who will fight 3 frat guys to save a drunk co-ed, but fight as dirty as possible. A guy with a beautiful wife who was molested by asshole doctors. A damn shrewd freak of a lawyer who wants nothing more than to be pointed in the right direction." He paused as the waitress brought the food. When she left, he continued, "The good guys won here. Stan will get his wife back and good revenge. The governor gets the opportunity to clean up the state's largest agency and install his people, and you get a good salary. Of course, if you were less efficient, you would get more, but I'm sure no one will complain if you take your time a little at the end." "What will you get, Mike?" "The pleasure is that those freaks who stuck a knife in my back and pushed me away went down. Plus the gratitude of the public and the current governor," he said, very pleased with himself. "And when the storm passes, when Abruzzo's friends come out from under the stones?" I asked. "By that time I will no longer be alive, and you, as you said, will be a little-known lawyer. We have nothing to worry about." I was not convinced of the latter. Politicians have long memories, and we have lost a significant piece of the patronage pie. But the food was excellent, and Mike's company was good, even though he was a son of a bitch. After lunch, I headed back to the office, knowing that I had been taken advantage of, but at least understanding why. I was sitting at the bar in the ballroom of the Gideon Hotel. It was the annual meeting of the Defenders Bar Association. It goes without saying that my short stint as a special prosecutor did not win me any friends in the defense bar. I was avoided like the outcast that I was. "Would you like to buy the lady a drink?" asked a female voice. I turned around and saw Carrie Wilson standing behind me. "I didn't know there were ladies here. I thought there were only lawyers here. Is this what is considered humor among special advocates?" she asked. "Well, we try to smile if we can." Poor Jimmy. He lost all his friends by putting people in jail. "This is not entirely accurate. Abruzzo got probation, and I had to clear Dr. Curoso, Claire Hudson, and most of the officers," I said. "Looks like the only fish you caught was Dr. Faraji, the least guilty of them all," she accused. "Can I have a drink now?" She was drinking a gin and tonic, and, glass in hand, led me to an empty table. "The governor thinks we should let Faraji go," she said. "Why?" "Like I said, he's not that guilty, and it seems a little unfair, and like he's being punished for something other than unauthorized procedures." She raised her eyebrows. "I knew what everyone was talking about. My wife fled to Africa at the height of the scandal. It was no secret that Dr. Faraji was after her. Some said Simone and Faraji were having an affair. The truth of these rumors did not matter because there was plenty of suspicion. And what? I heard your wife returned to Africa." "Yes, it's been about 3 months now. It must be difficult to be married." I had to laugh. "You know this is true, because we now live separately, according to the law. So, make a deal with Faraji, stop this scandal, and come to dinner with me," she said. "Have supper?" Carrie Wilson was offering me a way out. By letting Faraji go, the governor got what he wanted. The powers that be will not object to the fact that my prosecution did not actually result in anyone being imprisoned. "Yes, have dinner. Are the special prosecutors eating? Perhaps I am not the best company for an assistant governor." "Oh, you can handle it. You're a state university snob who looks down on Ivy League graduates, but you look good, and besides, I'd like to hear who the father of your sister's wife's baby is," she said with a charming smile. Lisa was pregnant. While showing me the ultrasound, Tara said the baby was a boy. The newly married couple was very happy, but there were rumors about the child's father. "How do I know that I can trust you with such confidential information?" I asked. She laughed and replied, "Because I'm not a lady, I'm a lawyer." Then, taking my hand, she led me out into the cold December night. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.